So there's one who's going to break open the way for all of these people, and he's going to go before them, right? They're going to break through the gate and go out. So the sheep are going to follow this person. This person is going to be their king who's going to pass before them, and it's going to be the Lord at their head. So I think this is a man who is going to be this person. I think the man is going to be king. I think the man might also be Lord. Welcome to day 201 of Bible 365. I am your host, Kathy Carter, and I'm reading through the Bible in 1 year, 365 days, using the chronological Bible reading plan from oneyearbibleonline.com. You would download chronological Bible readings because they have a bunch of different ones. And it's a free printable. Okay, so I'm trying to race the rain. It's day 201. It is July 19th, and it is Isaiah 34 through 35, and then Micah 2 through 5. So we have prophets today. We are in the time of Hezekiah-ish, give or take. It's around 740 to 700 BC. And it's around that time. So we have both Isaiah today and Micah. Hezekiah is the leader of the nation of Judah. Judah has been broken, Israel has been broken into two pieces. The northern kingdom, which is Israel, the southern kingdom, which is Judah. Israel has been taken by Assyria at this point. All that is left is Judah. They may or may not be. It looks like they are not following the Lord. Oh, this weird black thing in front of me. Okay, looks like they are not following the Lord. And so God is just letting them know. They're preparing. God's preparing them. Like he's sending his prophets and he's like, this is coming. And so be prepared and then I will bring you back. And he sort of said it pretty consistently in the time of the prophets. In this time period, we see a lot of prophets now starting to pop up. Some of what we consider major prophets because they come in and they sort of give a whole bunch of prophecies and the people are getting frustrated and they're not listening. So we're starting with Isaiah. We've been in Isaiah, and so we're just going to keep getting a little bit more information through Isaiah about what's happening, and then we're going to move on into Micah. So today, it is Isaiah 34, which is where we are starting. So again, the gist essentially is that Israel's been taken, Judah is next, but then the Lord's going to bring all of them back when they start to cry out to him. So, right, there's this pattern. It's like, and it's happened since the time of Judges. If you guys have been here from the beginning, it's happened since the time of Judges that, well, probably before that, but let's just say since the time of Judges, where the people fell away from the Lord, they kind of followed their own thing. And then they cried out to the Lord because the Lord was like, you're going to go do your own thing. That means you're not with me. And so they were with other gods. And so then they would cry out to the Lord like, oh, we really need you. We forgot you. We're so sorry. And then the Lord would come in and he would send a judge. And then this has essentially happened historically all since then. As a people group, actually it probably happened before that because thinking walking through the wilderness. As a people group, we forget. Now there are people individually that forget because I forget. I have moments where I am wholeheartedly leaning on the Lord. Good times, bad times, it doesn't necessarily matter. It's not really like a pattern for me. It's just sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. And then I forget. And then I start to kind of float. And I forget that the Lord is my savior, that the Lord is the one that helps me in all things, that the Lord is the one who protects me, right? I forget. And then luckily something happens or unfortunately something bad happens. And so then I turn myself back to the Lord. I start crying out to him. So I do that as a person. As a people group, we do the same thing. And so it tends to be like these cycles, these waves. And I notice it in so many other things as well. So I don't know if you guys have ever noticed, if you've ever noticed, like there's a time and a place for everything, which I think is kind of weird. Like right now we're in a time in history where certain things are happening, right? Like there's a time in history, let's just say, I'm going to use women, for example. There's a time in history where women have probably been trying for centuries in order to get the kind of freedoms and rights and authority. Maybe freedom and right is probably the wrong thing to say. The authority that we tend to have now. Not everyone will probably agree with me, but I feel like women are in a lot of positions of authority. They own a lot of companies. They are heads of a lot of companies. They have very good jobs. They are going to college more than men are. They are getting very high paying jobs and all kinds, right? Like they're lawyers, doctors, dentists, accountants, right? Like they're in every field. And so I'm going to say we have more authority now than we've ever had. But probably through all time, women have been fighting for, like, there have been a small group of women that have been fighting here and there. And yet somehow, some way, and for some reason, in this day and age, enough women sort of built up and we were able to get more authority, right? So it seems like things come in waves. I don't know if we get manipulated in waves or whatever it might be. And so that, I think, is true for how we kind of come and go with the Lord as well. And so they are in a time right now where they are sort of all falling away from their Lord. They're all forgetting who the Lord is. And as you guys know, I leave a lot of it to leadership because I hold leadership in really high regard. I think it's really important to be a good leader, and to be an honest leader, and to admit when you're wrong, when you are, which stinks. It's never fun, but that's what we're supposed to do. So anyway, going to Isaiah 34, he says, come near, you nations, and listen. Pay attention, you peoples. I always think peoples because it's not a normal thing that we have plural. And so I think peoples is people groups. It's not just like a whole bunch of people listening. Because it says after this, let the earth hear and all that is in it, the world and all that comes out of it. The Lord is angry with all nations, not just angry with Israel, but with all nations. And he's going to destroy them. He's going to give them over to slaughter. And then in verse 4, it says, all the stars in the sky will be dissolved, and the heavens rolled up like a scroll. All the starry host will fall, like withered leaves from the vine, like shriveled figs from the fig tree. My question to myself was, have we seen this? Has this happened? Would we know? If this happened, would we know? So I have heard from a lot of people, they try to equate the Dead Sea, nope, the Red Sea drying up, and the Jordan, because the Jordan does it one time. When Moses parts the sea, God through Moses parts the sea, and they walk on dry ground, right? So obviously the wheels don't get stuck, the people don't get caught in mud, which 1,000 tons of water has been sitting on it. You would think it would be muddy, but they dry it up so it's on dry land, and so they can walk all the way completely across, and then they come back. Well, I've seen scientific episodes where they talk about like how that time in the season, it could have been a dry season and all this kind of stuff. And all these things we try to substantiate through science, which, by the way, science is amazing. God made science, right? So I don't want to take any of that away. But we try and make his miracles less miraculous by saying it's something that could commonly happen in nature. Could this have happened and the people didn't notice, right? The people didn't see it for what it was, right? So they didn't properly read these scriptures, and so they didn't recognize it. Or has it not happened yet or ever, right? Like maybe they didn't do the kind of things that God wanted, and so God didn't do this, right? Like God didn't follow through and do this because the people never came back in the way that they were supposed to. So, but could we have missed it? Maybe it did happen and we just didn't note it because we called it something else. Oh, it was just really dark that night, right? Like, so I'm not sure. And I know that, again, these are things that we need to think about, and we need to recognize miracles for what they are and stop trying to make them a more natural phenomena, right? I know there is fear in recognizing a miracle because it's scary, and maybe people might think you're a little crazy. But I think that's the whole point of God, because I think that's how he shows himself. Moves on to verse 5, and he says, my sword has drunk its fill in the heavens. So that leads me to believe, and we saw this I think in earlier passages in Isaiah, where he destroys some of the heavenly hosts, right? So there is destruction up there. He takes his wrath out up in the heavens as well. And so it says, my sword has drunk its fill in the heavens, and now it's going to descend to Edom. So it's coming down to this place called Basra and Edom, which is what my scripture says. So both of them are what's current day Jordan, which I believe directionally is east of Israel. So it's away from the water and more inland. I think that's east. And also south of Judah. So Edom was like south of Judah and east of Israel. And Basra was east of Israel. It kind of took up this whole section east of Israel. Like a huge chunk of Jordan was called Basra. And so I think it's now in current day like Palestine, but I'm not completely certain about that. And so these places are going to be destroyed. So the Lord is going to kind of take all of these places out. Land will be drenched in blood. And then it says, for the Lord has a day of vengeance, a year of retribution to uphold Zion's cause. And I think this is an expression that it's not necessarily going to be one day, not necessarily going to be 1 year, but it's an expression for like, it's a period of time where he's going to have this destruction. And then it says, from generation to generation, this area is going to lie desolate. So again, I don't think we've seen this. It says, God will stretch out over Edom the measuring line of chaos, the plumb line of desolation. Her nobles will have nothing there to call a kingdom. Thorns are going to overrun. And then all these desert creatures are going to live there, right? Like, so nothing's going to be there. And it's going to have just all these desert creatures, which are all going to have mates, which I find an interesting concept of why they would talk about that. No mate will be missing. And so they're sort of going to overrun the land, right? Like animals are going to do all their living in this land. It says they will possess it forever and ever and dwell in there from generation to generation. And then when we follow in 35, it says the desert and the parched land will be glad. So like it's one of the things in way back in like Leviticus and Deuteronomy is this area of where land is going to be like killed off. And then it needs this time of rest and it's going to come back and it's going to be glad to have that time of rest. And then it's going to come back. And this might be something similar to what it is. He's going to destroy it. It's going to have its time of rest where all of the animals are going to come back. And then he's going to bring it back to life. See, he says, because after that in verse 5, he says, then the eyes of the blind will be opened and the ears of the deaf unstopped. So just like we talked about earlier, it's starting to rain. So I'm going to go in a minute, but I want to finish this. Water is going to gush forth. Burning sand is going to become a pool. So like all of this food and all of this is going to come back. A highway is going to be there and it's going to be called the way of holiness. And the way of holiness is for those who walk in the way. The way of holiness is for those who walk in the way. It is not for everyone. It is for those who follow the Lord. This is really important. Are you one that is following the Lord? That's what this highway is for. It says the unclean won't journey on it and wicked fools will not be there. No lion is going to be there. So there's going to be no destruction and no violence. Only the redeemed, the saved, the ones that the Lord pays for. They will enter into Zion singing. Why not? It's going to be amazing, right? There's going to be no violence, no unrighteous people, right? It's going to be all of those people who wholeheartedly follow the Lord, right? And enjoy and in excitement. And they're going to go in there singing. And it finishes up with gladness and joy will overtake them and sorrow and sighing will flee away. This looks like an amazing place, a place where I would want to be. So I want to follow the Lord in order to be at this place. Does it still exist? I hope so, right? I hope that this is the place where I will be after my body is no longer here, or the place where I will be when I believe that Jesus comes and returns, right? So we're going to keep following along that line. All right, guys, we're moving on to Micah. So I that's kind of a break from Isaiah, but we come back to Isaiah, I think, tomorrow. So we're not completely free of it. We're going to be in like prophecies for a while, and a lot of it is doom and gloom and death and destruction. So we're moving on to Micah, and Micah, we already read chapter 1. So we're coming from chapter 2 to 5 in Micah. So Micah is sort of at the end of the time of when Isaiah exists. All right, so he is also in Judah. So he's also in that land that is still, it hasn't been overrun by anybody yet. Assyria took Israel, but not Judah. And so here we are. And if we start out, just like we start out in so many others, like God really has a voice. You know what I mean? Like he really is telling you something. Woe to those who plan iniquity. So right away, if you plan iniquity, you plot evil, the Lord is against you, right? Defrauding people their homes, robbing people. Woe to you. There's going to be bad times to come. He's saying, I'm planning disaster against these people. Therefore, and this is the people of Israel. This is not, and by Israel, when I say Israel, I know I shouldn't, I got to be careful of this. But when I'm saying Israel here, it's really all nations, right? It's the entire nation of Israel. It's the 12 tribes. It's Jacob. So he says he's planning disaster against them because there are people that are supposed to be his people, that are supposed to be following his laws and decrees, and they are defrauding people. This is not the enemy. This is not the people that are, like these are not the other nations that are against. This is not Babylonia. Or Babylon. This is not Assyria. This is not Egypt. This is not Arabia. This is not any of those places. This is their own people. So this is the nation of Israel defrauding each other, in some ways turning against themselves. And he says, I'm planning disaster against these people, which you cannot save yourself. You will no longer walk proudly, for it will be a time of calamity, and other people are going to make fun of you. He says, therefore, in verse 5, therefore, you're going to have no one in the assembly of Lord to divide the land by lot. So, like, even your Levites are going to be gone. You're going to have nobody there to save you and protect you and to do some of that work for you. Moving on, it says, we had this in Isaiah as well. They're telling the prophets to stop prophesying, right? So they're saying, stop prophesying. Don't prophesy about these things. We don't want to hear any of this stuff. Stop telling us all this horrible stuff that's going to happen to us, right? And he says, why do you do such things? He says, do not my words do good to the one whose ways are upright, Micah says. Like, if you love the Lord, I think you want to know if you're doing wrong. Do you like, true, serious question for anyone who answers. Do you want to know if you're not following the Lord? Do you want someone to come to you and say something to you if it means it might hurt your feelings, but if it means that overall you're going to walk closer with God, or you're going to walk with God, because you might be in a place where you're not walking with him. You think you are, but you're not, because you've turned to iniquity and you've hurt people, right? So do you want to be rebuked? Like, do you want to, and in the way that brings you closer to God? I hope that you do. I do. It's not a good feeling, but like, I always want to be open to someone saying to me, I don't think that this is what the Lord would want, or I don't think that that's a good thing to do, or why did you get so angry, or why did you feel like you needed to cheat them, or like whatever. Like, I would want someone to come to me and to discuss the truth about God to me in a really personal way, because it might hurt at the moment, but overall, I want to be with God. I mean, that's my true heart in all things. And so I hope, if you're somebody who follows the Lord, I hope that that is true for you. I had a friend, and he's a friend who listens, and I had a friend who told me the story about how he feels like he did this thing that wasn't, by the way, it wasn't overtly bad in any way, shape, or form. And anyone would go, oh, you started out doing really well. What's the big deal, right? Like, so people would probably say that to him. But what he recognized is what he wanted was for his selfish gain. And so he didn't do this helpful act because of something because he would rather have been home. And guys, all understandable, right? But he feels like God immediately rebuked him for that, right? So God like immediately was like, oh, you didn't help? Oh, okay, then this is what's going to happen to you. And in a way, he embraces it, right? And he embraces it, and then he wants to grow from that. And now he's like, oh, I can't believe I did that, right? That's great. That's what we want. We want that, like that kind of that knock across the head to go, oh, I forgot, and now I've got to go back and do the things that you asked me to do in the first place, right? So I hope he doesn't mind that I shared at least a little piece of that. All right. So Micah's like, don't I do good? And then he says, he's telling them all the bad things that you're doing. So he's like listing all the things, like, you're doing all of these bad things, these things that are away from the Lord, right? And it says, for this isn't your resting place because it's defiled. Like, you have defiled the land. And if you guys remember when we were back in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, to defile anything was terrible. You couldn't go to the temple if you had touched a dead animal, if you had touched a dead body, if a woman, it was her time, whether she'd been pregnant or whether she, this was her monthly, whatever, like this, you couldn't go because you would be defiling the temple with your dirtiness. And I know that sounds and feels horrible, but there's a truth to it. We have to be careful that in the way in which we honor the Lord, we clean, and he cleans us, but we honor the Lord and accept all that he cleans for us. They have defiled, they have made God's land dirty because of what they have done. So they have made it unclean, which is dirty, which is gross. That's not what he wants, right? He wants us to be clean and to work on that. So in 2:12, it says, I will surely gather you. So now he's saying, this is terrible, right? And so all of these bad things are going to happen because of that. But then in verse 12, here's our hope. I will surely gather all of you, Jacob. the whole entire nation of Israel. I will surely bring together the remnant of Israel. I will bring them together like sheep in a pen, like a flock in its pasture. The place will throng with people. So I'm going to bring you in. There's going to be so many of you, right? I'm going to bring you in this little tiny pen, and there's going to be so many of you. And then in verse 13, the one who breaks open the way will go before them. So there's one who's going to break open the way for all of these people, and he's going to go before them, right? They're going to break through the gate and go out. So the sheep are going to follow this person. This person is going to be their king who's going to pass before them, and it's going to be the Lord at their head. So I think this is a man who is going to be this person. I think the man is going to be king. I think the man might also be Lord. I feel like that kind of might be what it says. If it doesn't say that, it also might say that this man follows the Lord and the Lord is his head, right? So I want to be fair that there could be two different things said in that. All right, moving on to 3, because I want to talk about this. It says, listen, you leader. Now he's going to berate the leaders because the leaders are responsible. Listen, you leaders, you rulers, if you don't embrace justice, like you are tearing these people apart. You are being awful to these people. These are your responsibility and you're tearing them apart. This is awful. Chop them up like meat for the pan, right? And they're crying out to the Lord because you're doing all of these things. But he's not going to answer them because you've turned them away from him, right? And this is what the Lord says. As for the prophets who lead my people astray, they proclaim peace if they have something to eat, but prepare to wage war, right? Therefore, night's going to come over you. This is it. You're done. No more visions. No more prophesying. I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm staying away from you, right? He says, but as for me, so Micah's saying this, but as for me, I am filled with power with the Spirit of the Lord, with justice and might. I'm going to declare to Jacob his transgression. So you're lying and you're telling them that everything is great. And so God's done with you. He's no longer talking to you. I'm telling them these things that feel like trash, but the Lord is sharing these things with me. And so I'm going to tell Jacob about Jacob's transgression because I want them to hear this. So it says, hear this, you leaders who build Zion with bloodshed. It says they look for the Lord's support. So there's going to be a point where you look for the Lord's support in verse 11. And then you say, isn't he among us? And it says, no disaster is going to come upon you. But it's verse 12. It says, therefore, because of you, Jerusalem's going to become a heap of rubble. So remember that, leaders. Remember how you're talking to people. Remember how you're leading people. Chapter 4. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of mountains. It will be exalted above the hills, and peoples, again, I'm thinking people group. I know I say it over exaggerated every time, but I think they're going to come to it. So this is the time where all the nations, there's going to be a time where like the mountain is up, the Lord is exalted, and then everyone's going to be able to come to the Lord, right? So many nations are going to come and say, come on, let us go. And then we're going to listen and God's going to teach us. So it's no longer just going to be for Israel, which by the way, it sort of already isn't just for Israel. But at this point, it's going to kind of explode and all the nations are going to come and he's going to say, let him teach us. And then it says, but so that we may walk in his paths. And then the law is going to go out from him. And then there's going to be peace. Nation's not going to go against nation anymore. He's done. Just the two. So then there's going to be peace in the nation. It said everyone's going to sit under their own vine. I know, I see you. All the nations may walk in the name of their gods, but we're going to walk. So everyone who's following the Lord is going to walk in the name of the Lord forever and ever. And in that day, the Lord is going to gather the lame. This is sort of like the big finish here. Well, I guess it's not quite. We're in 4. The lame. So it says they're going to gather the lame and the exiles. The exiles are sort of the leftovers, the residuals. The lame, awesome visual. The lame, and I kept thinking maybe there was more to it, but the lame are somebody who's like their leg hurts, they're like dragging a leg, or their leg got broken, or whatever it is, they're lame, they have trouble walking. This is the lame. The image that I came to immediately was Jacob. I don't know if you guys remember in Genesis, but Jacob wrestled with the Lord, and then the Lord touched his hip, and his hip was dislocated, and so he was lame for the rest of his life. And now Jacob is the nation of Israel. Is this a connection? I kind of feel like it is. I was kind of excited about it, that I feel like this is the connection. So he's going to save the nation of Israel. Now, it might not look like every actual Israelite, right? It might just be some. But this is what God is going to save, right? They are still his people. They are always going to be his people. I got to put him away. Okay, I'm back. Sorry. And so they will always be his people. So the Israelites will always be, and so they are, I think they are going to be his remnant, and they are going to be the ones he saved, and he will make the lame his remnant. And then it says, as for you, so there's going to be like this lame that are remnant, and then there's going to be a watchtower of the flock. So these seem to be a different sort of group in and among here, right? The former dominion will be restored to you. So they're going to get this different kind of restoration. So there's going to be a remnant, right? And then there's going to be this watchtower flock that is going to get all their stuff restored to them. And then, so if it, because right now they have no king, they have no leader. So it says, for now, you must leave the city to camp in the open field. You're going to go to Babylon, but you're going to be rescued. So I think there's hope in this. Like, I feel like there's hope in this. So they've been told you're going to get taken. Babylon's going to take you, but you're going to be restored. I promise you, you're going to be restored. But you have to stick with me. Like, you have to remember me. You have to continue to follow my statutes and my laws, right? You got to be with me. And there the Lord will redeem you. And then it says, so now the nations are gathered against there. So all the people are going to come in and they're going to take over the land of Jerusalem, right? But then you're going to come back. Rise, Zion, it says. Rise and thresh, daughter Zion, for I'm going to give you horns of iron, right? So God is giving Jerusalem over, but he's going to bring her back. And then we're in 5, where we're going to be finishing. Marshal you troops. A siege is laid against us, right? So here we go. It's coming. They're going to strike Israel's ruler on the cheek with a rod. So they're going to hurt the ruler, it seems like, but not kill the ruler. So the ruler's not going to be killed, and then they're going to be the ruler. It seems that there's still going to be a ruler there, but he's going to be slightly defeated. And then it says, but you, Bethlehem. So now we kind of change tacks a little bit. So that king's going to be beaten, struck with a rod. And then Bethlehem is going to, it says, though you are a small clan in Judah, right? You're this tiny little small clan. Out of you will come a ruler over Israel, right? These are, whoever you are, you're going to have these ancient origins. So there's going to come a ruler that has ancient origins, which might mean that they are a direct descendant of Shem, or a direct descendant of, if they can tie it back. I mean, I feel like we can all tie back to Adam. So maybe Shem is the one to tie back to, because it changed right from Shem, Ham, and Japheth, so which are Noah's kids. And so maybe it's the Shem portion of that, because I think Shem was the one that rules all, or maybe going back to David, like whatever it might be. So it says ancient origins. I feel like it's long before David. So I feel like Shem is probably a better descendant that it comes from. And then it says, therefore Israel will be abandoned until the time when she who is in labor bears a son. So here we go. I think this son is going to be the ruler over Israel. This seems the ruler that is from ancient origins. And then his brothers are going to return to join the Israelites. Maybe it's the rest of the other part of the tribes, right? Judah is one of them. And then the other 11 brothers in the tribe are going to come and join him. So all of his brothers, I think, will all be together, right? And they're going to stand together and shepherd their flock. They will live securely, for then his greatness will reach the end of the earth, and he will be our peace. It says, we're going to raise against them 7 shepherds who are going to rule the land of Assyria with a sword. So they're going to rule with a sword. You're going to kind of rule all over. He will deliver us from the Assyrians when they invade our land and march across our borders. And then it says, then the remnant of Jacob will be in the midst of many peoples like dew from the Lord. It will be among the nations in the midst of the peoples like a lion among the beasts of the forest. Your hand will be lifted up in triumph over your enemies, and your foes will be destroyed. I can totally see why anyone would think that a Messiah is coming in like a lion. It sounds like that's what's going to happen. It sounds like somebody is going to come in and they are going to just wipe out all of these other nations, right? Like this person's going to come from Judah and just tear through and save this remnant, right? And bring everybody victoriously to the Lord. In that day, he says, God's going to destroy everything, right? And he's going to take vengeance and anger and wrath on the nations that have not obeyed him. So he's going to save Israel. And then in this day, he's going to take vengeance on those who didn't follow him. That's where we're leaving today. So this is the prophecy with which they have heard, right? So this is a prophecy that has been heard in Israel, probably one that they lean on. And so we're going to see what happens throughout the next portions of these histories as we continue to read. So if this has been a blessing to you guys, I want you to like it, share it, subscribe to the channel. In the meantime, keep reading. See you tomorrow.